Hey guys, so first off, let me just say I'm sorry that I've been gone for like 8 weeks. I don't think it's been 8, I think it's been more like, no, maybe it has been 8. How long has it been? I've been away for a while. I had a traumatic couple of months. October, November. Yeah, it's been since like October, hasn't it? It's been a while. I had a rough couple of months there. Between various, there was a lot of stuff going on. School, personal life, everything in the world just sort of exploded. And when I say exploded, I do mean that it exploded, not like in the literal sense, but everything sort of fell apart, and not in like a crumbly sort of way, in an explosive sort of way. There was a giant shift in everything, and it was just very stressful. But hey, we're less stressed now. My show is over, you know, finals week is in 2 weeks. It's just, yeah, so we're back on track, and I thought I would come back, or at least work my way back in. Because, you know, I was supposed to be doing this, and I'm a horrible person for not having done it, so I'm sorry that I've been away, and I'm back now. Anyway, I'm going to talk about what I'm supposed to talk about now, which is dialogue and narrative. In terms of dialogue and narrative, it's different for me as a writer than it is for the rest of our writers, I think, because I write scripts, I write plays, and plays rely heavily on dialogue and not so much on narrative. We do somewhat rely on narrative because, you know, every piece of writing kind of needs narrative, I think. However, my narrative isn't really in the play. You could argue that your stage directions function as a narrative. However, your stage directions aren't anything that if you're putting narrative into your stage directions, the audience will never see it. You can describe things, but only if the audience isn't going to see what the character is thinking, unless your actor is really good, which they should be, hopefully they should be. But everything that your audience is going to learn is mostly going to come from dialogue and action. That's what a script is. It's dialogue and action. Not so much dialogue and narrative. You can't give, you know, the audience the character's inner thoughts. You could, but it would have to come through dialogue, because it has to be said out loud. They can't just read it. Obviously, if you've never seen a play, you know, yeah. So I rely very heavily on dialogue, and I actually like writing dialogue a lot more than I like writing narrative. I don't do narrative very well. I don't know, I get stuck on what words to use. I'm much better, I think, at writing dialogue, because when I write, I can sort of hear the characters in my head, and it's much easier for me to just work out what they're saying than to write all the things in between. I think like, in my opinion, it is much easier to write a play than it is to write a novel. I commend everybody who's writing novels, because I think it's very hard, and I enjoy writing scripts much more. But as I said, scripts is all dialogue, and I love dialogue. I think so much can be expressed through what a character says and what a character doesn't say. In terms of talking about dialogue, I think a lot can be said of writing what the character does, of thinking about what the character doesn't say, as much as thinking about what the character does say. You can say 10 times more with a line of silence. You can't really write a line of silence, but you can. But okay, you know what I'm trying to say. But you can say 10 times more with silence than you can with words sometimes, I think. And that's essentially how a novel and a book are different. When you're reading a book, you read the book, so you read that there is silence. But when you're watching a play, you hear the silence, and it's a different aesthetic response. You can kind of create the aesthetic response live, and that's what the difference is in writing dialogue with theater, is you have to think about how everything sounds out loud. When you think about reading a novel, if something looks good on the page, then it works. Whereas if you're writing a play, you kind of have to read it out loud in order to see if it works. Because if the words don't sound good coming out of your mouth, then generally the play won't read well. So you need to make sure that everything that you're writing can be said out loud if you're writing a play, which, you know, seems like it should be self-explanatory, but a lot of times it's really hard. I've struggled with that. If you make your character sound too smart, they don't seem real. So at the same time, you need to make sure that your characters sound real and not, you know, it depends on what style you're writing in. But in order for it to be accessible, it needs to sound natural. It doesn't need to seem, you know, weird. See, everybody else writes in novel form, and all I ever focus. See, this is my writing. It's all dialogue. It's nothing. This up here is, I think, the closest I ever come to narrative. And I've got stuff written all over this, but you know, you don't really with narrative. You know, my narrative says the lights come up on Jason standing in the middle of a starkly lit room with a stern look on his face. He stares intently at a silver briefcase which sits upright in the center of the room, and that's about. Like, that's what you're getting. You're not, you know, you're not getting every detail of the story. You're just getting which characters are placed where and what everything looks like. So you're not getting intention specifically with this. That's pretty much all you get. You know, too much stage direction in playwriting is bad. So you try and sort of keep out of it. I swear to God, it's getting darker in this room. Sorry, that was random. But, you know, too much stage direction is bad because you don't want to control your actors like a puppet. You just want to, you know, give them enough that they have something to go off of and create the characters. What you need to do with your dialogue, then, is to make sure that your dialogue is well constructed enough that they can take a character from the dialogue and make them a real person. So everything rides on dialogue with screenwriting too, but with playwriting. And that's what I try and do. I try and convey everything with dialogue. If the audience doesn't hear it, then they don't really learn it. Or if the audience doesn't see it, then they don't learn it. You can't. If it's not on the page, if they can't see it or hear it, then they don't get that information. Whereas with a novel, you can write, you know, this happened in the past, and you know, show your audience something different. So playwriting is a show me medium, whereas novel writing is a tell me medium. Which it's a different thing to work on. You need to focus. I swear to God, the lighting is really weird in this thing. Anyway, I will stop talking. But yeah, so I focus on dialogue, and I like it a lot better. And I think sometimes with writing, it's good to know what dialogue you're going to use first. Like even when I'm writing a novel, my dialogue is all done first. I write everything dialogue first, and then go back in and do the narrative later. Which I think is a good tip. If you ever get stuck, try writing out what your characters are going to say. And using that as a springboard for your narrative, because I do think they go hand in hand. So I think figuring out one can always help you figure out the other. Or if you write your narrative and then go back in and write what your characters are saying. This was long and rambling, and I don't know if it had a point, but playwriting, different from novel writing. That's what we learned today. You probably already knew that, but I felt like I would reiterate it. Anyway, so hopefully I'll see you guys next week. I love you all. I'm sorry I was gone for so long. Alright. Have a good rest of your week. See you in another week. See you on Thursday. And come back and see Janet tomorrow. And whatnot. And keep watching and subscribe and stuff. Alright. Bye, guys.